On August 10th, 2017, freelance journalist Kim joined Danish inventor Peter Madsen on his submarine, the UC3 Nautilus, with the intent of interviewing him. Several hours after they were expected to return, Kim's boyfriend reported her missing. A search ensued for Kim, Peter, and the missing submarine. The next day, Madsen was rescued from the sinking sub, but Kim was nowhere to be found. What followed was the most infamous criminal investigation in the history of Denmark. Hello and welcome to Fact and Suspicion. I'm your host Dan, here with my co-host Ben.
Hello.
And today we're going to discuss the murder of Kim Wall.
So you said she was a journalist?
Yeah, she was a Swedish journalist. She worked freelance, but she worked for all kinds of major publications. She'd worked for Time Magazine. Let me see. I've got it all in the notes here. She'd worked for Wired. She'd worked for Time. She'd worked for the New York Times.
So she was pretty well established.
Yeah, very well established. She would actually go into like war zones and stuff. She was, yeah.
And was this a privately owned submarine?
Yes, it was actually.
Is that normal?
No,
okay.
No. Actually, this at the time was the largest, privately built submarine ever. I don't know if it still is. It was 58 feet long, and at the time it was the largest. Now, Peter Madsen, he actually built this. This was the third submarine he'd built, and this one was built in 2008. Now, also in 2008, he founded the company Copenhagen Suborbitals with an architect named Christian von Bengtson.
Okay.
And he ended up leaving that company because he just had a lot of disagreements with Christian, but they were working on basically a private space program.
Oh, okay.
Was what they were doing. And in 2014, he left the company and founded his own company, Rocket Madsen Space Lab.
So it's like the SpaceX of Denmark?
Kind of, but like just much less money.
Right.
And they were, at the time just trying to get something off the ground. And basically these two companies were rivals now because he'd left the other company and Madsen wanted his company to get a rocket out in space first, everything like that. They wanted to eventually do a manned spacecraft though. That was their plan. Now,
would that be legal in Denmark?
I'm assuming. I mean, they were working on it, so I guess it would have been legal. There were no problems. But actually, he had garnered a bit of fame because of this program, the fact that he built the submarines, and he was just known. He did a TED talk about this stuff, and people kind of knew about him. They had learned about the rivalry between the companies, and Kim was working on a piece for Wired about Madsen.
Okay. And
she'd been trying to get an interview with him for a long time, actually, like several months. But she and her partner, whose name I really have trouble pronouncing, it looks kind of like Ollie, but I think it's supposed to be Oli or something. I don't know. I can't pronounce it. It's Swedish, right? Okay. But I'm just going to call him the boyfriend from now on, if that's okay. She and the boyfriend were planning to move to Beijing the next week. And on August 10th, 2017, they were having a going away party. And that day, Madsen contacted her and said that he wanted her to come on the sub with him that night for an interview. And she said, I've got to do this. I'm going to skip my own going away party.
Right.
And go to this. I'll come to the party later though. She only expected to be gone a couple hours, for the interview. So she went, but after, several hours, I think the trip left about 7:00, and she actually texted him some photos of her on the sub. And, the party was happening at a bar or a restaurant there, like close to the coast, where you can actually sit outside and see everything. And they actually saw the submarine launching and saw Kim waving on the sub.
So we know for certain that she
was
made
on
it
there. Yeah, about 7:00 is when that started. Now, the boyfriend, he waited for quite some time. He was only expecting her to be gone about 2 hours, maybe 3. But by 1:43 a.m., he's calling police.
Right.
He's like, something's going on. I've got to find her. And he reports her missing. Once he does that, they start looking for both of them because Peter Madsen hasn't returned either. They find out that his sub's still gone. They expected him back. So both of them missing. The sub is missing. And they start searching. And they don't find anything until the next day. And Peter Madsen is actually rescued by a private boat from his sinking submarine. the UC3 is sinking.
Okay.
And he says there was a problem with the sub. There's an issue that it sunk, but he's okay. And they're like, well, where's Kim Wall? And he said, what? Oh, no, I left her. I dropped her off like several hours ago, a long time ago. He said he let her off at the in the area where she's supposed to go back to her party.
So he didn't try to pretend like she had drowned?
No, he just said, no, I dropped her off and then I went back out on my own to do some more work.
I mean, doesn't that seem like the more believable lie between the two?
It does, right? And honestly, the police don't believe him from the beginning because they are already looking for a body.
Right.
And they actually test him for DNA and they find Kim Wall's DNA on his hands, on his neck, and in his nostrils. Now, I know, like...
Any speculation how it got there?
Well, yeah, with the nostrils, yeah, it's... I guess we don't talk about that much, but when someone's violently murdered, like with stuff splashing around a lot...
Oh, okay.
The DNA, their blood could get into your nostrils, and that's somewhere someone's probably not going to try to, like, clean very well, because you don't think about, it's in the nostrils, right?
Right.
But they actually swabbed in his nostrils and found some more DNA there. Ooh. And they go ahead and bring him up on charges of manslaughter. Or involuntary manslaughter at the time, because they don't know what's happened exactly. They don't know, but they know, her DNA's on him. She's missing. Can't find her anywhere. Last seen with Peter. So they're looking for a body at this point.
Right.
Now, as I said, we find Kim's DNA on Peter's body, which is highly suspicious.
Yeah, a little bit.
So they go out and authorities find the Nautilus. And it's not that far down. It wasn't very deep where it sunk. So they raise it and they bring it back to shore and they look in there and they find her blood where it sort of had congealed in the sub.
Okay.
So obviously something happened on that sub, right?
Yeah, no question.
Now, where he said he dropped her off, they go and start checking CCTV all around, because there are restaurants and everything all around.
If you're going to go with that lie, you have to know. Mm-hmm. Particularly, and this was like had to have been some sort of dock or something, right? How does a submarine even dock?
Well, I mean, it's definitely like a marina or a dock there,
Yeah, they're going to have footage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
people have expensive boats there,
and there are a lot of nice restaurants, bars right there. It's a popular area right there in Copenhagen, right? Mm-hmm. Now,
why would this guy be so dumb to think that police wouldn't check that and they wouldn't have them?
I have no idea. I really don't know why he would be so dumb. But they checked, and you can't see Kim anywhere on it, and no submarine either. Like, obviously, you're going to see the sub if it pulls up there, right? Nothing. So then Madsen finally starts to change his story, because
yes, you do.
Obviously, this is not right, isn't it? So what he says is that actually that Kim was killed when at the latch, the hatch on top of the sub, which was about 70 kilograms, fell on her head and it killed her.
He explained how this happened?
He didn't at the time. No, he said just at the time it was about 70 kilograms. That's about 150 pounds. So I can imagine something 150 pounds, that could kill you. Yeah, right. And she fell down and killed her. And that he panicked. And just buried her at sea because, he thought, I'm going to get in trouble for this. We're going to lose the submarine, lose the company. And he panicked and buried her at sea. So, at this point, they're adding charges of, mishandling a corpse to his involuntary manslaughter. And then they start searching his computers.
Please tell me there are no obviously stupid Google searches.
Oh, there are a lot of things on this computer. They find a lot of pornography that depicts murder, torture, beheading of women, things like that.
Into snuff films.
Yeah, and one of these, some of these were animated, but there was one that authorities felt was probably a real, authentic snuff film where one was decapitated. And he had searches on his computer for things like that, like torture and stabbing women in the genitals and stuff like that. There was just a lot of very disturbing material that he had been viewing.
So he'd probably been building up to this for a long time,
right? I was
assuming it was his first. And as bad as his lies were, it probably was.
Yeah, I think so too, because this was handled very poorly. And let's go on. I want to discuss a few other things that probably point to this being point to this maybe being his first murder. Because earlier that week, his company was scheduled to have a launch of a rocket. And they were launching before their rival company, right? But they had some cash flow issues and weren't able to do the launch. And Madsen was just really upset after this. She seemed really manic. And now the other company is going to be ahead of them. So I feel like that kind of crushing blow to him and him being so manic might drive him to do something like this if he's been wanting to do it for quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, especially when combined with the whatever weird fetishes he had.
Obviously, he's already got some weird fetishes. So yeah. So we've definitely got... I guess what you could call motive at this point, right?
Yeah, that dude was basically a ticking time bomb.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Now, August 21st, Kim's torso is found. Now I say torso. No torso. Arms, no legs, no head.
So just a torso.
Just the torso. And it had been strapped to some metal tubing, apparently to be weighted down, but I guess it had floated up and was found close to Denmark on an island off the coast. And
had he sawed her appendages off?
Yes, it appeared that they had been removed with a saw, and she had been stabbed multiple times in her genitals.
Like the Google search, the searches, whatever they were.
Just like those searches. Multiple times after she was dead. It appeared that she had probably died from asphyxiation or her throat being slit. It was gruesome what they found.
Do you have any idea about how long after she got on the sub that it turned?
No, violent? It was really hard to determine that because, with the water and everything, it's going to throw off any kind of timing or stuff like that. So you don't know for sure, right? It's not like if they were submerged, she couldn't really call for help on her phone or anything like that.
Yeah.
And they never actually found his or her cell phone. So he probably just tossed them.
Yeah.
I mean, you toss a cell phone in the ocean, you're not going to find that. And that's August 21st when they find the torso.
Okay.
So at this point, he finally starts to change his story again.
Lovely.
And is saying that, well, she didn't actually drop the hatch on herself. He was holding the hatch for her and it fell on her head and killed her, and he panicked and he was trying to get her body out and
he had to
cut it up to get it out of the sub, and that's the only way he could get the whole body out.
And he still thinks this sounds reasonable?
I don't know. I really don't know. And then later on, he actually changed the story again to say that he was up on deck outside and there was a problem inside and she died of CO2 poisoning and decided that he had to dispose of the body.
Oh, okay. I half expected he just walked down and she was cutting off her own arms and legs.
Yeah, you would think at this point, right? Like the things he said. And this guy's supposed to be some kind of genius too, like a real rocket scientist.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it.
At any rate. Now,
maybe he should stick to rockets, and murder does not seem to be his bag, man.
Right. Now, as I said, August 21st is when they find the torso. Now, the way they find the rest of the body, and this is in October, is actually kind of interesting. They brought in cadaver dogs from Sweden that can smell the cadaver from above water when they're underwater.
Okay.
Which I thought was really interesting. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't
know that was possible.
But they found her arms and her legs and clothing all in different bags. And they were all tied to metal tubing as well to be weighted down.
So he took the Dexter approach here?
Yeah, it seems so. He did. And authorities suspect at this point that he was planning on just making his own snuff film when he took her. Mm-hmm. That was the whole plan.
I think that's pretty clear at this point.
Right. Now,
this was absolutely premeditated.
I can't disagree with that. Now, let's talk though about what is like. I don't want to say what's the reason you do something like this. There's no reason, right? But obviously this guy was very disturbed. There was some really terrible shit going on in his head. I guess he was quite distraught over his company issues, right? They didn't have enough money. Like the company could have been failing for all we know, right?
A lot of people are stressed about work. They don't murder people
I'm just talking about what actually led up to this. We do know that his father was very abusive, though not necessarily to him. He was abusive to his stepbrothers.
Oh, well, daddy issues.
And he saw his father being very abusive to these people, and that may have seeded something in him.
Well, you should have said that from the start, Dan. It all makes perfect sense now.
Right.
I mean, they didn't put that poor victim in prison or anything, did they?
Yes, actually. Well, let's discuss
After that horrific abuse he went through as a child?
Right. Now, they actually upgraded his charges to, instead of involuntary manslaughter, it went to just manslaughter. Now, that you're going to think that why just manslaughter, but in Denmark, manslaughter is equivalent to our first-degree murder.
Right.
So, I mean, that's not that strange. Okay. Like, it's what we would call first-degree murder. Dismemberment and indecent handling of the corpse. Right. So you got all these charges. He's obviously found guilty, even though he's maintained his innocence at this point.
Isn't Denmark one of those countries that has pretty low maximum sentences for prison?
Well, he was one of the very rare people that was sentenced to life.
Oh, okay.
Now, even though in Denmark, though, I think it's 12, 15 years, something like that, they bring you up for reevaluation.
Yeah, I thought it was similar like the Nordic model.
Yeah, it is. Well, and they bring you up for reevaluation to see if because they're trying to rehabilitate you to see if you're rehabilitated can be released. Mm-hmm. However, they do have caveats in the law so that even if you do seem rehabilitated, if they do feel that you could still be a danger to society, they will continue to hold you forever. Okay. But yeah, it was very rare for anyone to be sentenced to life.
Generally speaking, I prefer that system to ours.
Yeah, no, and I like the idea of trying to.
Let's be clear. I don't know that you rehabilitate someone.
But no, we're talking, and honestly, a lot of the cases we talk about these crimes, none of these people could ever rehabilitated, right? And
even if they could, as much harm as they've done to the victims and society, maybe it's best they just not be rehabilitated.
No, I completely agree. Well, I don't have a problem with trying to rehabilitate them and fix their mental health issues, but you still can't just re-release these people. You can't take that risk.
I mean, you can't have a functioning justice system if victims don't feel that people are paying for their crimes. No, and you have to balance rehabilitation with punishment. And I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, but...
Well, I'm not saying that this person should just be rehabilitated and released again. I just feel like there's nothing wrong with trying to fix the mental health issues.
No, I'm not saying there is.
And try to fix that so this person could have some form of peace and deal with what they've done and try to, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, there's a lot that goes into this, I feel like. Now, I don't know what.
It doesn't have to be cruel and unusual.
Right, exactly. And in someone like this, you can't re-release them. It's just...
No.
I mean, for instance, we covered a case a long time ago about Daniel LaPlante. Mm-hmm. Right. He was
a guy that lived in the walls of that family,
a teenager.
Right?
He lived in the walls of a house, was torturing these people. He murdered people. Terrible. But Daniel LaPlante had been abused by multiple people from a very young age. Right. So with that, I feel like, Daniel LaPlante, for instance, it was terrible what he did, and he could never be re-released again because he's dangerous. But at the same time, this person was a victim too.
Yeah.
Now,
Daniel was much younger than this guy.
Peter Madsen, on the other hand, is basically a celebrity that builds submarines and rockets. And, his dad was mean to his stepbrothers.
Right.
This is completely a different matter.
Not quite the same thing.
Yeah. Now, but let's look at what he actually did here. This guy wanted to make a snuff film with this girl. He decapitated her. Now, they never found his DNA on her body. So I'm not going to say he didn't sexually assault her because this was very sexual in nature, but I don't think that he had sexual contact with her. Right. I think it was mostly like violence and murdering, but they did find semen in his underpants they took from him. So obviously, right, this was definitely sexual gratification
he just
for him.
Didn't rape her.
Yeah. And this honestly seems like the kind of thing that if he had gotten away with it, he would probably kept doing. Like this seems like, to me, like the birth of a serial killer.
I agree completely.
Now there were definitely some questions that authorities had trying to tie in maybe to some past murders, but let's be honest with this one. He made so many mistakes. I don't think he could have done this in the past.
It's highly unlikely that he murdered someone else.
No,
he made so many just glaringly obvious mistakes.
Well, let's. I know this is strange, but let's talk about some of the issues of his crazy mistakes here, right? For one, you talk about the CCTV.
You don't.
But before that, you can't murder like a journalist that everyone knows is coming to do an interview with you.
Well, it would make sense if your plan was what I thought it was initially, where he was just going to kill her and then pretend as though they wrecked and say she drowned.
Right. Yeah.
Right. You can do it that way. But yeah, you're right. If your goal was to cut her up into pieces and make a snuff film, then no.
Yeah, what are you going to do? But now I will say that there was a chance he could have maybe gotten away with that if he had just found a random person on the street and said, "Do you want to come ride in my
submarine?"
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, God, I'm not saying he should have done this by any means.
You're right. It does seem like a strange choice to pick a public figure like that.
Right. Maybe he was just desperate and thought, hey, this woman really wants to do an interview with me. I'll make her get on my sub with me.
Is there any chance that he had some like weird fixation on her specifically?
I don't think so, because if he had, I think he would have definitely given her the interview long before that.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah.
But she'd been trying for a long time to get this interview. He was just always. I don't think he was trying to withhold the interview for any nefarious purposes. It seems like he was probably just very busy with his work.
Yeah, obviously.
And he was. I mean, he was strange too, though. And when you see what's happened here, you have to start thinking, well, maybe we understand why he's having some issues with his business partner, because this man's insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you do all this, then you obviously keeps changing the story. Like, well, yeah, she did die and I panicked, this and that. But obviously you can't say you dropped someone off in this public area where there should be plenty of CCTV footage. You can't do this to someone that obviously people are waiting for. She's a well-known journalist. This woman went into war zones. She knew what it was to be in danger, and she should have never had to deal with danger right here. But obviously, I would say she would take precautions, any kind of interview she was doing, for people to know where she was. And she had done that in this occasion. She sent the pictures. She told him where she was, everything like that. She did her, her due diligence for anything like that. Right.
Yeah, of course.
I've actually heard multiple people say, though, that the shame of it all is that she was such a prolific journalist and done so many impressive things that really the least interesting part of her life was her murder. Yeah. With some of the other things she had done and she'd accomplished, we lost a major journalist here that was, brave and did all kinds of things like that. Had a lot of big work out there.
I don't know if I consider working for Wired a high spot necessarily, but.
Well, I mean, Time Magazine, New York Times, I think the New Yorker as well. I have to look back and look at all the publications. There's a lot of stuff. The Guardian.
I don't have a very high opinion of journalists, that.
I understand that, but
I mean, even if it just in our realm of true crime, they get so much wrong.
They do.
It's painful.
However, you have to understand, this is someone that did go right out there in the middle of things.
No, I don't mean to insult her.
Yeah, obviously, I'm just saying that she was, a well-known journalist and got right in the middle of stuff. Yeah. Wrote for Vice as well. A lot of stuff, a lot of publications, but. And yeah, we know there are tons of even with this, in this case, even though this is such a popular case, looking at different articles, you find different details, different set of facts. In a few articles, I kept reading there was a fishing boat that rescued him from the sinking sub, and others is just like a private motorboat, which I guess could technically be a fishing boat, but it's just these little details. I know
it makes it difficult to reconcile when you're trying to present the information to an audience.
It is. So I don't want to say it's a fishing boat, just it's a boat. A boat rescued him. But right, and there were other people, like the people that saw the sub sink actually said he seemed very calm when it was sinking. And this was like the sub that he built. This was his baby, right? Like, and it was actually a major part of their business plan for the launches. Like, they needed the sub. I'm not sure why. It was some kind of control center for their rocket they were going to send up.
Did he ever explain what went wrong precisely with the sub?
He said there was an issue with the ballast tanks, though authorities were able to determine very quickly when they raised the sub that it was sunk on purpose. It wasn't just it wasn't a mechanical malfunction.
No,
he basically, I think, it opened up the valve and just let it go. Which is another huge mistake, right? You'd think that he'd actually damage something or, something like that. And, do you really think that if you do this kind of murder, like this violent, blood everywhere, terrible crime, gruesome, do you really think sinking a sub is going to eliminate that evidence?
No, obviously not. No.
I mean, if it's down there for 20 years, maybe, but
it's not going to be.
I mean, people actually saw the thing sink. He wasn't that far out. It went down like 20 feet.
How far submerged was it?
It's 22 feet. Submerged that was where it was sunk. Like, it was on the bottom at 22 feet. And I mean, it wasn't hard for authorities to bring it back up.
Yeah, of course.
And another thing that just is so crazy to me is if you watch some of the documentaries about this, you'll see interviews and stuff. But one particular documentarian was shooting a documentary about the rockets when this all happened, and she's there with the people that worked for him, interviewing them when he's missing, and they are so worried about him, talking about how we don't know what's going on. The journalist is missing. I know for a fact, though, if something went wrong, he would have helped her out first before he saved himself. Well, that's a direct quote. Well,
I was actually going to ask you if his friends and family were like, yeah, we saw this coming.
No,
the exact opposite.
Exact opposite. No one expected this out of him, which is really strange. Or at least in all the interviews I've seen, I haven't seen anyone say, "Oh, I saw this coming." Right? Of course, this was before they found out anything happened. This is while the guy was just missing. Right? It's just such a crazy ordeal, and it was huge in Denmark, but it was international news as well. I remember when it first happened, people were asking the questions. If you're out in international waters, you kill someone. How are you,
how you tried?
How you tried for it. But they weren't even that far out. It was Denmark. He was still in Denmark.
Right.
Was
I'm assuming the trial.
Oh, it went pretty quickly. Yeah. And actually, I
don't know if they have a jury system there, if they use judges or what.
I'm honestly not sure either, but he was found guilty. And I will say that even though he maintained his innocence all through the trial and kept changing his story, he actually explained away the stab wounds by when he was this is when she was apparently had died of the CO2 poisoning.
Right. This was one of the later variations.
And he said, I was trying to get rid of the body. He actually stabbed it so many times to release the gas so it would sink. But he did in a documentary, a Danish documentary,
finally
back in 2020, did finally admit to the murders.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Finally,
which he decided that if he ever wants to get out, he needs
to. Obviously, if you want to be released this type of crime, you're going to have to admit to it. If you keep saying I didn't do it, they're not going to let you out.
Which of course incentivizes just admitting to it.
Mm-hmm. But honestly, I really hope they never let him out anyway. Like, this guy would definitely
certainly do it again.
Yeah, obviously, he would do it again. Especially he was for this genius guy too. He's so dumb. Like, obviously, he's going to try to do it again.
I mean, he just made so many, just rookie error after rookie error.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I hate to say something like that, but my God, if this dude ever listens to a true crime podcast, he should know, right? We're not trying to.
Even if you obviously we do not.
No, we're not trying to educate serial killers. I'm just saying,
do you really need to be some sort of professional murderer to know that unless you've scouted an area out and know whether there's camera footage, that you don't tell the authorities you dropped a human being off there when you actually murdered them? Doesn't that just seem common sense? That
does seem very, very common sense,
and
actually.
He had an expensive vessel, right? It would have been a normal question for him to ask someone at the marina or wherever he was, hey, do you guys keep security footage?
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to leave my expensive submarine
Don't want to leave my sub here. My largest privately owned sub in the world.
Yeah. I think it would have been a perfectly reasonable question. It wouldn't have sounded suspicious at all.
No. I guess the thing is, maybe his mental state, because of what happened with his failure at work and the fact that his former company was surpassing him, this was apparently a really crushing blow to him. Maybe his mental state after that, he just couldn't think straight.
I think it's clear something was going on.
Right.
No, this was probably some sort of fantasy he'd been having since.
Obviously it was. I mean, when you look at his computer and all the snuff films and stuff on it, this was something this man had planned. Like he had, videos of people being decapitated. Like
most people who commit sexually based crimes like that say that it starts around puberty.
Mm.
They start having very violent urges.
I don't understand why someone with this, this level of intellect, though, wouldn't have tried to get some kind of help for that.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right. Especially when you're so driven to do something like with your life, like go into space or something like that, you'd think that you would say, hey, I should get some help with this so I don't.
He probably just went over the scenario so frequently in his head, he convinced himself he'd get away with it if he did it.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I think it's also one of those things that he thinks he was so much smarter than everyone else.
Probably so.
He was just arrogant about it and just said, I can tell this story.
Yeah, no one will suspect me.
No one will suspect me. I mean, my sub sunk. Why would I sink my own sub?
Because they're detectives and their job is to make sure you didn't sink your own sub, moron. Not
to mention, Denmark has such a low violent crime rate. Mm-hmm. Their detectives have a lot more time to work on.
Yeah, of course. It's not like the U.S.
They had plenty of time to work on this one. Like they don't really have a lot of murders in Denmark. But that basically wraps up the case. It was a terrible tragedy and something that I will say it's good that this guy was stopped when he was, because I think this could have continued. This guy seems like
come on. With the way he went about this one, I think that was pretty much inevitable.
Well, right.
He was never going to be in it for the long haul.
Well, if he'd gotten away with the first one, maybe he would have figured it out. I don't know. It scares me to think of someone that a serial killer that wants to make snuff films terrifies me.
If people that incompetent are getting away with murder in your country, you got bigger problems than serial killers.
That's a good point. But we would like to thank you for watching or listening to Fact and Suspicion. If you enjoy our content, we'd love it if you'd like, subscribe, leave a comment, interact with us any way you can on the platform you're viewing us. We love it if you can tell someone else about us, though. That's the biggest thing. If you like our content, tell a friend. Tell them to check us out.
All right.
Thank you, guys, and we'll see you next time.